Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So as you can tell, I don't have any makeup on. I am makeup free right now, and I thought it'd be really fun to do a reading wrap up because I have a ton of books right now that I need to wrap up. Like, I haven't done a wrap up in about 2 months. So I have a ton of books that I need to talk about, and I thought it would be really fun to combine my old style content with my new content and kind of mesh the two. And I thought this would be really fun because one thing that I've noticed with like TikTok videos and stuff is I will always listen to a story time if the person is applying their makeup while they're telling me the story time, because it like gives me something to watch while I'm listening. And I feel like it makes a huge difference with me staying to watch content, is if I'm like watching somebody do something. And so that's why I'm gonna do my makeup while I wrap up my books. Now, I don't know if this is gonna be like easy to do. This might be really hard, but we're just gonna try it. And then if this ends up being like a fun thing that I enjoy doing, or if you guys really like it, maybe this will be how I do my wrap-ups from now on, is makeup application and a reading wrap-up at the same time. So let me know if you guys like this idea. So the last book that I read since my last wrap-up was Project Hail Mary. So I read this book and I was reading it while I did my last wrap-up, and you guys, this book is so good. If you guys have not read this book or any Andy Weir, I've actually not read any Andy Weir other than this book, and I haven't seen The Martian either. Like, was not Andy Weir aware before this book. And I mentioned this actually in that video that I just started reading this book just to see if I would like the writing style of it, and it ended up being like so engrossing that I read like 50 pages in one night. And I wasn't even planning on it. Like, I was gonna quit reading it after like 2 pages, and I just couldn't stop reading it. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm reading this book now. Like, it wasn't part of my TBR or anything. Now, I'm kind of a sciencey person. Like, I like science, but I wouldn't say that I'm like super knowledgeable in science. And the only reason I gave this book 4.5 stars instead of 5 stars is because there was a point in this book where Andy Weir was like, I'm gonna make this as realistic as possible, and I'm going to explain every sciencey thing that comes up in this book. So like, there is a lot of very intricate science. It's really interesting and it's very tangible. Like, he explains it really, really easily, so you like really understand like what he's saying, which makes it really fascinating. But I would definitely say by like the end, maybe middle end, I was kind of like a little burnt out with all of the science explanations, because he does really, really go there. But with that said, it's not hard to understand. Like, you guys will understand it. It's really easy to understand. It's just sometimes you get a little burnt out with the science, I feel like. But this book, I was not expecting the plot. Like, the plot of this made me realize that I really, really like a certain trope in a book. I had never read it before, and I'm not going to say what it is, but there's a certain thing that happens in this book, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to read more books with this specific trope in it. It definitely has a little bit more of an emotional side to it, so it's not just sciencey, you know what I mean, like very emotionless. This definitely has a lot of thought-provoking things in it that really makes you think. I just didn't want to put this book down. Like, I was reading it in my hot tub. This definitely has a little bit of like a found family element to it. It definitely has like a tight friendship bond, so if you really like friendship tropes and things like that, then I think you're really gonna like this as well. And it just has really good character development. It has a good plot and good characters, which I think makes books really, really well when it has kind of both things driving the story. And I think that that's why I like this so much, is there was always something that was like keeping me reading. Okay, so the next book that I read was The Dead Romantics, and I think I talked about this a little bit in a video, but I can't remember. This book was just okay. Like, it wasn't my favorite romance ever. This really had Emily Henry vibes. Like, you know how Emily Henry's books are kind of marketed as romances, but they're not really just romance. There's definitely like a larger plot going on with the romance. That's kind of how I feel like The Dead Romantics was, and I liked it actually. I thought it was a good story, but I wouldn't go into this thinking it's going to be like this epic romance or anything like that, because I wouldn't say that it necessarily is. And I also didn't love Ashley Poston's writing style. Like, one thing that really bothers me, and I've talked about this in past like book reviews, is when the author doesn't do like the character descriptions or the setting descriptions right off the bat, and they wait a while to do those descriptions. And so you create these characters and a certain setting in your head, and then when they actually start describing these things, they don't match the setting that you already created in your head, and you're like, oh, So I was supposed to picture these people like this? Like, I wish you would have told me at the beginning, because I was not picturing them this way. Because about halfway through, she started kind of explaining this family as kind of like a gothic type of family, maybe like slight Addams Family vibes. And that's not how I was picturing them at all. And I was kind of mad that I was picturing these people wrong the whole time, because I feel like if I would have pictured them kind of gothic, I would have loved the story so much more, but I couldn't change it at that point because it had been too long into the story. Like, I already have the characters in my head, right? So I kind of was irritated by that, but I like the overall idea and concept of this story. So this is basically about a girl who has this like ability to see ghosts, and this new editor that she meets is kind of a butthead to her, and she doesn't really like him that much because he's kind of being not very nice to her. But then when she goes home to visit her family, this editor shows up at her doorstep at her family's house, and he's a ghost. And she's like, what the heck? Like, did he die? And so she's kind of trying to help this ghost of this guy that was kind of mean to her pass on, or like move on, or kind of process his death. And it's actually really interesting. Like, I thought the characters were really interesting, and like the things that they were going through. Like, the ghost character in this was really interesting, and seeing him struggle with death and like what he was supposed to do. Like, he didn't really know how to like pass on, and he was just kind of sitting in limbo. And it was really interesting kind of seeing his character in that way. So I really liked that about it, but I wouldn't say that this is the most page-turner book I've ever read. Like, it was kind of hard for me to get through at times. Like, I found myself a little bored. Oh, I think that this would have worked really well as a dual point of view. I think that seeing the ghost's point of view would have been extremely interesting, and to kind of see him looking around at the outside world now that he's dead, and kind of him processing what he is seeing and what he's experiencing. I think that would have been really cool, and I think it would have brought even more connection to his character. Like, I already kind of liked his character, but I think I would have felt more connected to his character if it was more like a dual POV, and I think it could have benefited a lot from that. The only two criticisms I have is it should have been set in the fall. I don't know why this book wasn't set in the fall, because I read it thinking it was going to be kind of fall vibes, because it just seems fall-y just by like the synopsis, but it wasn't. It was set in the summer. And it was also extremely verbose. Like, she talks and talks and talks and talks. And I feel like this book could have been edited down a little bit, in my opinion. So I think I gave this book 4 stars, but I think it was a little bit of a lower 4, but it was still 4. Like, it was still a really interesting story, and I liked the characters, so low 4. So the next book I read was Most of All You by Mia Sheridan, and as you guys know, I loved Archer's Voice, and this was the second book in kind of like that world. Now, this book was really cute. Like, if you love a good romantic romance like Archer's Voice is, then I would recommend this one as well. I wouldn't say it's as good as Archer's Voice. Like, Archer's Voice is like top tier. Like, she really, really did something good with that book. But this has similar vibes, you know what I mean? Like, it's more romance-based versus like smut-based. And that's what I really, really like about Mia Sheridan, is she definitely focuses more on the romance. And this has a female main character who is a stripper. And she's really struggling. She had a really bad childhood. And she meets the male love interest because he also had a really traumatic childhood. And he was abducted as a kid. And so he doesn't know how to make connections. He's very, very triggered when people touch him, and he really wants to get over some of this trauma that he experienced when he was abducted. So he wants to hire this main character, who's a stripper, to kind of like help him move past some of his issues. And she agrees. She's hesitant, but she agrees because she needs the extra money because he's going to pay her. And then she gets in an accident and she has to move in with him because he's like, okay, you need to be taken care of and you have nobody to take care of you, so you need to move into my house. And while you're helping me, I'm going to help you. And so it kind of becomes this like forced proximity thing. And it was overall a pretty cute story. I could see how some people may not like this plot line and may not like maybe how sex work is portrayed. I'm not really sure. I think it kind of depends on your stance on it. But overall, I thought it was a really cute romance. Like, the romance part was really good. The main character is very protective. Like, it definitely has that protective caregiver quality to it. So if you really like that in like a male love interest, then you're really gonna like this one. And overall, if you liked Archer's Voice, I would say to read this one because you'll probably like it. Because it just has those same vibes. You know what I mean? It may not be as good, but it's still pretty good. I think I gave Most of All You 4 stars. So it wasn't 5, but 4 stars is still good. And I think it was more of like a higher 4. Before I continue, I'm using the ColourPop Roaming Hearts palette. This is one of my favorite palettes ever. I don't even know if it's still being sold, but this is like the only palette I use day to day. It has the perfect colors in it. I love it. Use it almost every single day. I need to do my highlighter first, actually. So where was I again? Oh, The Whispers by Ashley Audrain. So, as you guys know, The Push is one of my favorite books of all time, so I was really excited to see kind of what she would do with another book. I was just curious to see if it would have that same impact. And one thing that I can say about Ashley Audrain is she is not afraid to tackle the taboo. Like, she wants to just tackle subjects and things that are very uncomfortable to read, talks a lot about motherhood and kind of the taboos of motherhood, like things that people feel, things that people do, and just the crazy aspects of motherhood in a very like taboo type of way. And this book is basically, it's not a thriller. Like, I thought this book was going to be kind of a thriller, but it's more so like a family neighborhood drama, which I'm not really a fan of that type of book. Like, this is just kind of like a whole bunch of like housewives and families, just like, and the drama between them, the gossip, and basically one lady is a mom, but she's a working mom, and she doesn't really love motherhood all that much. Like, she is a mom, but she doesn't love it. Like, she likes working better, but she is a mom, and she's doing her best, but she tends to lose her temper a lot. And then one day, she loses her temper on her son, and he's upstairs in his room, and the window is open, and it's in the middle of a barbecue, and she gets so frustrated with her son that she like yells at him, and she doesn't realize that the window is open. And so all the people at this barbecue can like hear her like cussing out her son, right? And everyone's like, what the heck? That is crazy. But nothing really happens. She like tries to play it off or whatever. And then a few days later, her son falls out the window in their upstairs house, and he goes to the hospital. And everyone's like, who did this? Did she do it? Like, how did this happen? You know what I mean? And people are questioning her, people are questioning her husband, she has friends in the neighborhood, then she has like enemies in the neighborhood, and they're all like that weird connection, and everyone's talking and everyone's gossiping, and it's kind of like trying to figure out what happened, right? That's basically the story. And I'm not a huge fan of stuff like that. I just think it's kind of boring, to be honest. I just don't like a lot of talking and gossiping. And so I feel like this book got really boring to me, and it got really drawn out. I listened to this on audio, but I was kind of like, if I would have read this physically, I would have been really, really bored. Like, I know that I would have been bored. And the only reason I really like kind of liked it was because I read it on audio, and I could just kind of like do whatever I'm doing while I'm listening, you know? But it wasn't that interesting of a book. Like, yeah, the ending was kind of interesting and seeing how it all wrapped up, but it wasn't interesting enough to like work through the entire book. Like, I didn't think the ending was that crazy. So, I don't know. I gave this book a 3-star. Like, it was fine, but it definitely wasn't like my favorite thing ever. You know what I mean? And it's the same type of thing with like high school drama in books. Like when I read a YA and there's a ton of drama going on in like their high school, and they're talking about like everyone's like relationships and friendships and what this person did to that person and blah, 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 blah. Like, I think it's so boring. Like, if you kind of like that really rich drama, then you may really, really like this. Because I know there are a lot of people that like a lot of that really rich, juicy drama. And that's definitely what this book is. Rich, juicy drama. And that is definitely for some people, but it's definitely not for everyone. And I am one of those people that don't really like it. So, I think I'm definitely going to give Ashley Audrain more chances in the future, though, like when she writes future books. Because I do like how she's not afraid to kind of tackle things that are just a little bit taboo. I hope this video actually turns out okay, because it's really hard to like think of all the details about books while I'm doing my makeup, because I'm concentrating on my makeup. So if you guys like this, let me know. If you don't like it, I won't be offended either. Like, if you want me to just talk about the books in more detail and more like concentrated, let me know, because I can do that as well. I think I'm gonna add some sparkle, because why not? I've actually been kind of into sparkly eyeshadows again lately. Like, I kind of went through a whole matte phase, but I'm kind of into just like adding just like random like shimmer on my eyes. Like taking like a big fluffy brush like this and going into like, I don't know, like this gold one, and just kind of like dusting it all over everything and just kind of giving myself like a little bit of shimmer, you know? I don't know, it's just kind of fun. Okay, I need to do my eyebrows. So this is my eyebrow product that I've been using for like the past year, and it's Wet n Wild, and it's the Ultimate Brow Kit, and it's basically just like a dark brown and a medium brown, and I use the medium brown in the middle part and then the dark brown on the outer part, and it looks really good. So that's what I've been using, and it's really cheap. So Dear Saraphina was a really cheap audiobook, or no, it was free, and it was really short, so it's like a novella. And I was like, I'm gonna read this today. I have a ton of chores to do, so I'm just gonna listen to this. And I think I finished it in one day. And this was actually really good. I gave this 4 stars. So this starts out as a kind of obsessed fan of this movie star, and she's like writing her letters, and she kind of is writing this movie star these letters as if they're like journal entries. So she's telling her all about her life, and like she's kind of treating this movie star as like her journal, and so she's just kind of like writing to her every single week, and you're just kind of like, okay, this is kind of weird, right? As the story goes on, she gets a little bit weirder and a little bit weirder, and you're like, this girl's a little bit creepy. And that's pretty much all I want to say about it. So like you can kind of see where this is going to go, right? And the thing about this book though that I really liked is it took a turn that I was not expecting at all. Like this is one of those books where you think you know where it's going, but you actually don't know where it's going. And that's what I really appreciated about it, because I like books that just kind of like do something completely different than you're expecting. And that's why I really like this. So if you're looking for something that's kind of weird and different and unique and something that you haven't read before, I highly recommend this. And it's so short. Like I love a good novella, especially audio. Like that's been kind of my thing lately, is audiobook novellas. And as you guys know, I read that Dirty Liar book, and that was my last wrap-up video, and I really liked it. And this one was good too. So I highly recommend this one if you want something with like kind of a twist, something that you're not expecting. It was really fun and really good. So I think I gave this 4 stars. What is the next one on the list? Oh my gosh, you guys. The next book I want to talk about is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I could literally talk about this book forever. Like I am not even kidding. This is my new like favorite series. Okay, not my favorite. A Court of Thorns and Roses is my favorite. Like I feel like everyone has that one series. It's like their #1 favorite. That's like everyone's favorite. Like some people's it's Harry Potter, some people it's Court of Thorns and Roses, some people it's Throne of Glass. But I feel like your second favorite series says way more about you and your personality than your #1 favorite. You know what I mean? So comment down below what your second favorite series of all time is, because I think that says so much more about a person. And I think that this might be my second favorite. But I'm not going to lock that in because her last book is coming out at the end of this month, and I don't know if I'm going to like it or not, but right now, love this series. So, this is, like, how do I explain this? So it's basically about this girl, Evangeline, who gets heartbroken because her true love, that she thinks is her true love, is getting married to her sister, and she's, like, really upset about it because she loves this guy, and she thinks that he is, like, her true love. So she wants to stop the wedding, and by doing that, she goes to a fate named Jax, and she makes a deal with Jax. And she knows this, but she does it anyways. These fates usually are tricksters, and they're very manipulative, and so if you make a deal with these fates, a lot of times, like, they control you, basically, to do whatever they want you to do, and she decides that she's going to make the deal anyways. And so when she makes this deal with Jax, he says, okay, that's fine, but you owe me 3 kisses, so I get to choose who you have to kiss. And so she's like, okay, that's not that bad, so she makes the deal. So the rest of the book is him trying to get her to fulfill this deal, right? And in this process, she finds out that she's a key. She's the only key that can unlock this ancient door. And Jax wants her to open this door, but she doesn't know why he wants her to open this door, and she doesn't know if it's bad, she doesn't know if it's good, she doesn't know if it's like cursed or if there's something really bad inside of this door. She doesn't know, but he's not going to tell her. So he's trying to get her to open this door, and he's like manipulating her, right? But that's like really, really basic, but that's kind of like the overall plot line, right? But the thing about this book that I loved so flippin' much was the characters. The characters are so fleshed out, they're so unique, and she stayed on character with all of the characters. She didn't change their character like halfway through where they kind of stop acting like themselves. You know what I mean? Like I see that happening all the time in books. And she didn't do that with these characters, which I appreciated so much because their characters were so specific to themselves. And A lot of people say to read Caraval first because you can kind of understand Jax's character by reading Caraval first. And I actually am glad that I didn't read Caraval first, because I think when you go straight into Once Upon a Broken Heart, it puts you in Evangeline's perspective, because Evangeline doesn't know Jax's character, right? She doesn't know who he is. She doesn't really know his background. And so when you're reading the story, you're also making judgments about Jax right along with Evangeline. And so it makes it really interesting, because you're like, I feel like Jax is an unreliable character, but I can't really trust my own instincts, just like Evangeline has a really hard time throughout the whole story, like understanding whether or not she's being manipulated or whether he's kind of a good guy, he's not a good guy. Like, she can't really tell because she doesn't know Jax, but she's trying to kind of like base her feelings about him on like how he treats her and stuff. And I feel like if you don't read Caraval, you are doing that right along with Evangeline, and it makes his character really unreliable, really morally gray, and it makes you kind of go like, I don't know what I think about Jax, like the whole entire time. And that's what I really, really loved about reading this series first and not reading Caraval first. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on that. But like, that's what I really loved about this book, is because I felt like I was being manipulated right along with Evangeline. Like, I didn't know if my feelings were right or wrong. And I could tell the entire time why Evangeline was making the decisions that she was making. And I feel like if you read Caraval first, then you're not going to like Evangeline's character as much. But if you read this series first, you're going to understand Evangeline's character a lot more, because you're kind of going along the story with her, so you get it. And that's how I feel. Like, I really, really, really love Evangeline's character, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, she drove me crazy in this, like she made so many bad decisions. But because I was like in her boat with her, like, I'm like, I get it. Like, I get why she made the decisions that she made, and why she kind of like followed her heart sometimes and, you know, didn't listen to her logic. And I really, really like that, because I got it. Like, it made sense to me. And I loved Evangeline's demeanor, and I loved her hopefulness. And one thing that I don't often like in like a lot of fantasies, and I'm getting really tired of this character, is like these really jaded, bitter characters, like main female characters that just like don't care about anything, and they're mean, and they're not hopeful characters, they're not optimistic, they're extremely pessimistic, and they're kind of mean to everybody, and they're jaded, and I just don't relate. And one thing that I loved about Evangeline is she was a hopeless romantic, and she never lost it. The entire book, she remained a hopeless romantic, and she stayed idealistic, and she stayed optimistic the entire time. She like never lost hope. And I feel like I relate so much more to that. And I feel like a lot of romance readers, people that read a lot of romance, are hopeless romantics, so they can understand and they relate more to Evangeline in that way, right? Because that's how we are. We're hopeless romantics. That's why we read so much romance. And I love that Evangeline stayed that way. Like, I appreciated it so much because I could relate to her character. The entire time I was like, that I would have made that same decision in that situation, because I'm a hopeless romantic. I'm an idealist when it comes to love. And she never lost that side of her personality. And I loved it because it was so refreshing. I also loved the setting. It was whimsical, it was like a fairy tale, and it was so beautiful. Like, the thing that Stephanie Garber does so well, like, the books are not long. The books are only like 350 pages, and the font is really big. So these books are not long books, but somehow, even in that short of a book, she was able to create this setting and this scene that was so beautiful, so whimsical. It felt like a fairy tale, and I loved it. Like, some of the scenes, like in the Hollow and stuff like that, was beautiful. And the Hollow is actually in The Ballad of Never After, which is the second book, which I loved just as much as the first book. And just some of the scenes, I'm like, I just want to be here so badly. It just sounds so beautiful. And I also felt like she told a very unique story in very little words. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes I feel like fantasy novels all kind of feel the same. Like, there's a kingdom, and then there's a princess, or a human girl who falls in love with the prince, but then this kingdom is at war with another kingdom, and blah, 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 blah. It's like the same thing kind of over and over again. But this was a very, very unique story that I hadn't ever read before. It kind of felt like how I felt after I read Strange the Dreamer, where I'm like, that was unique, that was special, that was not something I've read before. This felt similar to that. Like, it had nothing to do with fighting, nothing to do with politics and kingdoms fighting each other and a prince and blah, blah, blah. I also felt like there was very little tropes in this, like, and if there were tropes, which all stories have tropes in it, obviously, but the tropes didn't feel super tropey. Like, she was able to use tropes in a way that didn't feel like they had been done before. They didn't feel like I was like aware of the tropes as I was reading them. Like, you know when you can just see them right in front of your face, like, okay, this is like enemies to lovers, this is blah 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 blah. This felt like I wasn't like noticing the tropes as I read, which was really, really refreshing as well, because it just felt so new and unique. And I really appreciated her for being able to do that, because I think that's extremely difficult. Only thing I did notice a couple of times was there were some plot holes, and I did mark them in the books where I'm like, wait a second, how does that make any sense? So I did pick up on a few plot holes here and there, which it's fine. I can usually suspend my disbelief a little bit if I'm liking the story enough. I can just be like, okay, that's fine, whatever. If I'm not liking a story enough though, a few little mini plot holes will really, really irk me. So it kind of depends on like how much I'm loving the story. But overall, I gave the first book 5 stars and the second book 5 stars. And I really hope I can give the third book 5 stars. Like, it ends, The Ballad of Never After ends on a trope that I'm not a huge fan of. It can be done in a way that is good, but can also be done in a way that is like really, really frustrating and irritating. So I'm hoping that she's able to use that trope in a way that works. I'm crossing my fingers, but I'm so excited to read it, you guys. Like, I love this series so much. It's just like, I have a guilty pleasure for it. So that is the last book I'm going to talk about in this video, because I'm done with my makeup. Huge transformation. But I have a few more books that I could talk about, but I'm just going to talk about those ones for now, and then in my next wrap up I'm going to talk about the next ones, because I think I have like 4 more that I could be talking about. But that is where I'm going to leave off, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you did, and I can definitely do the makeup and wrap up videos every month if you guys want. This could be like my style of wrap ups. I think that'd be kind of fun too. So let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.